Welcome to Health Stealth Radio, where we move away from the mundane to gather insights from the shadows of enterprise and patient cybersecurity. Yes, we surely believe that traditional themes like endpoint software and zero trust are critical, but given massive advances in AI, remote and wearable device hacking, and data hostage negotiators, there's a much darker side to cybersecurity, and not everyone is quite willing to talk about it in public. Health Stealth Radio will thrive on these topics and encourage fireside spats to debate them. Here's your host, Frank Katita.
So I'd like to thank Jodi for being here today. It's a rare treat. We've passed each other in the healthcare technology circles for years, but never really had a chance to sit down together. Obviously, she's got one of the most legendary firms in this segment, and she's got some great insights that we're going to look into today about which way public relations is going. And I know that they're not strictly limited to PR, that they're a marketing firm as well, which is great because I want to make sure that we look at these as the intersection of those two. So, Jodi, maybe just to start, could you give us a little background of how you got to where you are today, how the organization started, what you did as the early years of PR and marketing in your career, and I'm sure the audience would like to hear that.
Yes. Well, first of all, Frank, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. And then to call us legendary, I just want to reach out and give you a virtual hug. I so appreciate that. Yeah, so we are actually celebrating our 20th year anniversary, so a lot of history in healthcare technology. I am one of those rare folks who went to BU and majored in mass communications public relations, and I'm still doing it today, 33 years later. I started my first job in PR, working at a healthcare and tech agency on the East Coast, worked there for 13 years, the first 6 in New Jersey, and then moved to Arizona and opened up a West Coast office for them because they only represented East Coast clients. And when 9/11 hit, things got pretty rocky for them. And so I ended up leaving and starting my own agency. And at the time wanted to do something a little bit more fun and not do healthcare, health tech, but it followed me, and I'm happy that it did. And so we started Amendola Communications and was a little bit ahead of our time. We hire where the talent is, even though we did have an office in Arizona for the bulk of our history until COVID hit. I found that it's really hard to find good, seasoned healthcare, health tech, PR, and marketing experts in Arizona. So we hire where the talent is. We also differentiate in that we hire senior level folks. For the most part, most of our team members have 10, 15, 20, 25 years experience. And the other big thing I think is that we've been constantly dynamic, but focused on being experts in what we do well and being honest and transparent about not being all things to all people. And then the final thing I'll say is that PR has really changed. It's not that scattershot approach it used to be. It's become increasingly data-driven, and programs have to generate results, have to show ROI, and it's just really all about metrics. If I just read something the other day, it said, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So I think that we do a really good job of getting great results, showing our ROI, and that's why we keep our clients happy and lots of repeat clients with companies coming back time and time again. So
that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
We always ask what you do during your free time.
My free time, I'm a avid pickleball player, so I used to be a big tennis player, but that over the last probably 5 years or so, I can't get enough of it. So I try to limit myself, believe it or not, to not more than 4 or 5 days a week because my body just can't take too much. It's very, short. But, I also do yoga, I walk, hike, I take my dog for walks. I love to travel. And then, of course, I spend time with my family. I have a daughter who is applying to PA schools, and husband, and
That's great. That's great. So I mean, you've 20 years. I mean, you just, if you look at what's happened in just the last 9 months,
Yeah.
I mean, it's seismic changes, and we never thought that that possibly could happen. We look back at Y2K and just thought, oh my God, what a phenom that was.
Yeah.
We have the notions of earned, paid, and owned media, and I'm sort of curious in terms of the mix that you work with. I mean, are those, like my father used to say those words, or I mean, are there new forms of that? Are they morphing? What's the latest on those three, and maybe a fourth that's coming out? And I've got a feeling that there might be.
Yeah, no, that such great question. So I'm seeing more and more of folks looking for the integrated campaign support. So it's not just coming to us for one bucket of earned, which is, definitely our bailiwick, but we
Hmm.
do both owned and paid as well to support our clients. And I have a great example of a company who just recently re-engaged. They had been a long-term client, got sold and bought by a big company, came to us and now said, we want to do focus campaigns, 6 of them over a 10-month period, and have us handle all aspects of it. So it's almost like really outsourcing their entire marketing and PR function. And
Hmm.
I'm seeing more of that. I'm doing an RFP right now for a total outsource program. And like, I couldn't be more excited about that. When they all work together, that's when you really can get the best results. But of course, there are those smaller digital health companies that can't afford to do them all. And so in those cases, I say earned will give you the biggest bang for the buck. It's credible. It carries that halo effect of being published in a media outlet. It's based on the merit of the news. But it's been challenging as more print publications have folded. I mean, you're no stranger to this, right?
Hmm.
Media has moved online, and we've all felt the pain of the shrinking opportunities for thought leadership byline articles in this period. So we've shifted to do more podcast interviews, more video interviews
Hmm.
for our clients, and they love it because it's weighted heavier with SEO. And then you can leverage those pieces for your owned media campaigns. Owned has definitely grown through the years. There's a high demand for health tech, digital health companies who want to differentiate themselves. And so they can tell their own messaging with owned media. We jumped on the content marketing bandwagon very early on with Health Catalyst and produced amazing results and have been going, gangbusters with that ever
Great
since.
content.
Great content, but you can also combine them, right? So we recommend leveraging our earned media assets for marketing and sales campaigns. And then you asked about paid. So obviously paid has increasingly grown over the past several years and very helpful in today's changing media landscape. So to meet prospects where they are, especially on LinkedIn and B2B. So we have many clients that amplify their LinkedIn posts by targeting specific job titles in specific markets. So if you can do a paid, earned, and owned, then I think you have the magic formula for rising above the noise, because it's a very crowded marketplace, and similar companies tend to claim a lot of the same things, even
Sure.
if they don't do that right. You asked about the evolution. There's now a shared category. Things like social media and word of mouth referrals tend to be the most powerful. And so we suggest, monitoring activity. Look out for opportunities to engage in the conversation. Share LinkedIn posts or white paper that addresses a challenge, a problem with potential solutions. Syndicate your content through channels that have more brand visibility. But with any of these, I mean, the biggest challenge really is metrics. Earned and shared are difficult to show metrics or attribute leads to. They're like soft conversations with social
Right.
media, PR, and that's always our biggest challenge, because everybody today wants the same metrics that they can get from their digital campaigns with PR. And we have measurement in place, but it's not always possible.
Are you finding any new metric models out there? Something that we wouldn't have seen a few years ago, or are they still pretty much the same?
They're still pretty much the same. I mean, we
Mhm.
use a robust database called MuckRack, and we can show things like share of voice and sentiment, and
Mhm.
develop the KPIs up front, and then report on it on a
Mhm.
weekly basis, a monthly basis. Usually, for most campaigns, it's quarterly, because that way you can really show the results and also show how each company compares against their competitors.
So you're able to use some of that sentiment metric to build into the emotional aspects of some of the content that you're doing. Is that
Yeah.
sort of moving away? I mean, not moving away, but enhancing the age-old battle of getting people to want to do thought leadership content as opposed to shameless commercial content, and then building emotion into that that's a little bit different than the noise that's out there.
Yeah, I mean, the key is to not have negative sentiment, right?
Mhm.
And we have had clients that have come to us, and I've had team members say, oh my gosh, run the other way. But they've turned out to be some of the most rewarding programs that we've done, where we've been able to shift to a neutral sentiment, and then a positive sentiment
Mhm.
away from negative. So it's all about, conveying appropriate messages and showcasing the right thought leaders, including the end users, and showing metrics and results. How has your solution improved the financial and clinical metrics?
Mhm. Do you think there's still a gravitation for many of the people in healthcare communications to gravitate towards vanity metrics as opposed to real metrics?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, we can only measure what we can measure,
Right.
and really, people just want to show some type of ROI to their C-suite.
That's for sure. Um, so on the topic of artificial intelligence, which has to be brought up in any conversation that we have right now,
Yes.
yeah, I'm doing a talk in a few weeks on AI washing. We had greenwashing during the sustainability days. Now we have AI washing, that everything has to have some form of AI in the
Absolutely.
messaging. Do you how do you how do we wrestle with the fact that everybody has to have it in their messaging, and yet there needs to be substance in order to make it go as far from AI washing as possible? Are you finding that this is something that your clients feel that has to be in almost every thread of their promotional and content materials?
So I'm finding that our clients who have some type of AI solution are part of the conversation,
Hmm.
and that's been super helpful to generate ongoing publicity for them. For us, AI is a little different. I mean, I marvel at what generative AI can do,
Hmm.
like ChatGPT. It's amazing. But for us, and the battle that we have is that you still need human writers and media relations
Hmm.
pros. So there are definitely shortfalls within the technology. The scary part is the hallucinations,
Absolutely.
right? So, and for us, really, we don't want to get into those murky areas of plagiarism and data privacy. So for us, our clients and our media relationships are built on creativity and personal connections, and generative AI is kind of ho hum. It can't connect with a journalist on a personal level. So I think generative AI does have a place in PR and marketing. We
Hmm.
use it at the agency for initial research. And then it helps also create the creative thinking. It's a tool. And like all tools, it needs a human behind it. So I think it's definitely, great. We can't ignore it. It's going to get better and better. So I think it's safe to assume that it's going to be an even bigger part of our world. No matter how proficient it gets, though, I still don't think that it'll replace people.
I don't think so either. So I think the interesting thing is that when I look at paid, earned, and owned as sort of media types, and then you talked about shared as well. I'm wondering if there's not going to be a generative media,
There may be.
which is I mean, how
Yeah.
how does an organization get into those algorithms so that when somebody goes onto ChatGPT and asks a question about something related to healthcare IT product, what do you do to optimize as you would in SEO? How do you optimize generative to get the results that you're hoping for? And that's out there, I think, where the buses don't run right now. Pretty wild stuff. But I think that could very well, and in many cases, when you use it, you know that is, in a way, the next form of media. So what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely do think that it's coming. I don't think we're quite there yet, but if you want to chat again in 6 months, I'll have more to report on. I'm good
It's
with
6 months. This is the time frame that we're working in right now for something to change dramatically in the business right now. It used to be, talk to me in 6 years. Now it's
it.
a week after next, maybe something's going to be totally different.
Yeah, I mean it's very fast paced. It's great in one way, scary in another.
It is. It is. So I work with a lot of firms on the cybersecurity side, and one of the things that comes up, I mean, they have great technology, sometimes not great enough, and they're usually there the first to admit it. The technology is not going to be 100% of the solution. So there's the human factor, and then there's the part for communicators like us where what happens when it does happen. So I'm wondering if in any of the work that you've gotten into, I went to a great simulation at IBM cybersecurity range in Cambridge, Massachusetts here, where I thought it was going to be a bunch of geeky tech people, and what it was were a lot of communications people in these simulations,
Yeah.
talking about, well, what happens when this thing breaks? How do we set up a communications breach protocol and start communicating the ways we have to? I'm wondering if Amendola has been involved in any of these things or advise your clients sometimes on breach response and things like that.
Yes, absolutely. We have seen a big uptick in crisis communications planning over the past few years, not just recently, but over the past several years. We have a client in cybersecurity. You and I were just talking about that.
Mhm.
And the first thing that I learned from them is you can expect a cyber attack. It's not if, but when.
Mhm.
And that is pretty scary. What we help our clients do is communicate effectively during a breach, because that is crucial to maintaining trust with customers, stakeholders, the public. And so we develop these crisis communications plans to try to prepare our clients for a data breach response well in advance of the incident, so that they're not scrambling, because you really have to have timely communication when something like that happens. So we outline roles and responsibilities, and develop messaging scripts with holding statements. We prepare the spokespeople in advance. We identify a chain of command, who's responsible for making what decisions, explaining what happened in concise language together with the organization's position on the issue. So you want to explain what, and then you want to explain how audience should respond to the situation, how the organization is responding to the situation. And then you also want to engage with the why. Explain the impact the situation has on operations, so that impacts aren't blown out of proportion. So there's things like, you have to be transparent, you have to be clear and use jargon-free language. And it is a multi-channel approach. So multiple communications channels, such as emails, website notifications, social media, press releases, whatever you have to do to reach the broader public.
And you're going from the boardroom down to the front desk. So I mean, it's really all encompassing in terms of the path of least resistance, just like viruses in general, are the people that don't know what to say appropriately at the right time. And that might be with the CNN, as they did in the simulation. They had a fake CNN reporter go up to the front desk and start asking questions, and the person goes into panic mode.
Absolutely. You have to do role playing, because you just don't know how you're going to react or what you're going to be hit with. I mean, there's so many factors that go into a data breach. I mean, you have to even think of like regulatory compliance. And it's not just informing your audience one time, it's the continuous updates. And then when all is said and done, learn and improve. After the breach has been resolved, you want to conduct an analysis and identify what you can do better, and what data security practices and communication strategies you need to employ going forward. The way that an organization handles their data breach can have lasting impact, as we've seen. We don't want to impact an organization negatively. We want to mitigate those negative effects of a breach and rebuild trust, and take accountability for it. Show empathy.
It's sort of interesting that your comment about chain of command. I've done some interviews and we talked about, are military people the best people for chief information security officer? And the normal thinking would be because they're defense oriented, that they think about defense and that's built in their DNA. And I was corrected a number of times saying it's not really because they're defense oriented, it's because they know the chain of command. Mm-hmm. And it's been part of their lives. And during these breaches, the chain of command is more important than the technology or anything else in terms of getting around it. So I think your point is well taken there, and I think this is a huge area. We're doing some work on some interviews on Health Stealth Radio on the data hostage negotiators, which is another communications channel that could we believe 10 years ago that we'd have people out there negotiating to get data back, just like you're negotiating to get live hostages back.
Wow.
So given these things, I mean, we talk about the workforce in healthcare, which is challenging to say the least. And then if you lay healthcare and marketing and PR on top of that,
yes.
What are the challenges of firms like your own? I mean, I know you've got the talent because I know many of them and I've seen it, but on an ongoing basis, what are the most challenging profiles to get out there in the competitive marketplace?
Yeah. So, the things that have really changed over the years, like I said, is the data and analysis that people have come to respect. Mm-hmm. I mean, PR is increasingly data driven. So we want to have folks who can analyze the metrics and extract insights to measure the impacts of the campaigns. So that's really important. And that's definitely newer. I mean, years ago, we used to just give our clients a big clipbook and they'd say, thank you. Now they want to measure everything that can be measured. So that's number one. Number two would be digital skills. So it's not just traditional PR and marketing, but SEO, content creation, social media management, the ability to navigate the online platforms. And there are numerous platforms. So, and to your point, so it's the digital skills, the data analysis on the PR side and marketing side, but you also have to know healthcare and healthcare IT. Mm-hmm. So that's a real niche, and finding those folks, it's a little harder. Mm-hmm. So over the years, we've always hired a senior level team. But more recently, we've hired some younger folks who can do research, who can do graphics, who can do social and digital. That's become really important. And then, of course, cultural competency and diversity is apparent in any industry these days. So definitely want to have some inclusivity and representation of all.
And I mean, you mentioned diversity. I mean, there's so many different ways of looking at equity in that regard. But I mean, just when we look at the content development that we're talking about, I serve as a co-chair of the Patient Family Advisory Council at Spalding from days as a patient there. And just the diversity of communication styles culturally, national cultures.
Oh, yes.
You feel that?
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, everything that we're doing, whether we represent the vendor or the hospital or payer organizations directly, it's all about the patient. It's about patient care. Mm-hmm. So it's about communicating effectively to patients and their families. And so, yes, there are definitely, communication styles and lots at play.
Great. So a lot of the work you're doing is are for the vendor companies. I mean, which is the core business for both of us. At Chime, we obviously have the people that are the cream of the crop in terms of the senior level management. And I talk a lot about them building their own personal brand or the brand called IT within the healthcare enterprise, which, when you look at the continuum of technology people, CIOs versus CMOs, marketing people, it's, they're just like cultures and countries being different at times. Uh, Do you work very much? Are there ways that you work with? I'm sure you do it with the vendor leadership, but also within healthcare organizations in terms of them building a brand within the organization, or in essence, a brand called IT, which can be respected and be more than just the land of slow and O, or the help desk that really never gets back to them quickly enough.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think probably one of the biggest vehicles for CIOs or almost any C-suite in healthcare tech today is LinkedIn. It's a platform that everybody's on and respects, and there's that two-way communication and a way to build your personal brand where you can be unique, and really show your thought leadership and your point of view. So they can share personal experiences, lessons learned, case studies, success stories, write LinkedIn posts on a regular basis, write articles, videos. They can promote their own, Chime speakerships, and they can also participate in LinkedIn group with their peers. And in healthcare, it's a very peer-to-peer focused industry. So I would encourage them to work with their trusted vendor partners with cutting edge technology such as AI, as we talked about, to share their outcomes working with healthcare technology. The vendors that they're working with often have PR partners like us who can pitch them for media interviews and speaking engagements so that they can showcase their clinical and financial ROI stories. And that's what's important to everyone.
I agree. I work a lot with, especially in the orthopedic area. I'm involved with an organization there, and one of the things we found in terms of communication is that everyone was given an iPad to do telemedicine with, or they could have it on their desktop. But let's just say, for the purposes of this, it's the iPad. That we're teaching them how to use the technology and Zoom or whatever the platform is. But I think one of the things that I'm seeing is been dramatically missing, as being one who spends a lot of time on the other side as a patient watching these people, is this thing called telepresence, and where telepresence fits in within the healthcare organization. I mean, who manages that? Is it the chief medical officer? Is it chief medical information officer? Is it the marketing department? So we've given them the weapons to go out there with, but I tell people, they're sick of me hearing me say it, that most of what I've seen in terms of communication skills at the physician level has been, I see male pattern baldness as they lean over and are clicking on the screen as they're talking to me. So I think that's it for me. This is just sort of my own rant. I think for communicators, this is one of the top areas, because it's not going to go away, and it's going to expand, and in some cases, it's changing, that people need to know how to communicate through that medium.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when we look at this, I mean, you've got a new client, or you've had established clients. What are the biggest challenges you find in terms of dealing with clients, in terms of what their expectations are, what they want from a top-notch agency like your own, and what it takes to get them there? What are the kinds of things that institutionally you find you spend most of your time changing or massaging or cajoling?
Yes. So clients who have data, unique data, clients that have good thought leaders, and clients that have clients, so the end users who can actually tell their stories, fare best. It's more challenging with startup organizations who don't have that long history of clients and may only have one client, and you don't want to keep tapping the same client over and over. What's the most challenging is data, because while PR is probably the least data driven of any of any PR and marketing vehicle. So we work with our clients to see what they do have, what assets they do have, who their competitors are, how we can differentiate them from their competitors. Because sometimes competitors just steal your language and say the exact same thing. So we need to show how they're different and why their technology really is doing XYZ. So we also align them with industry analysts. That's not something we talked about today, but we work with folks like Gartner and Healthcare Industry Insights, Frost and Sullivan, to get them into targeted reports that they're doing. And that, helps them tremendously with credibility, in addition to those third-party endorsements in media outlets and podcasts and things like that.
That's great. So I think we're getting close to the close here, and I just want to make sure that if there are any other words of wisdom, or I always ask my interviewees if there's something, I can't believe this guy didn't ask me this question. Any parting thoughts or words of wisdom or gems that you would share that I might have missed here?
I think you did a great job, Frank, and I so appreciate it. I would just say that very often vendors cut PR and marketing when their budgets get cut, and that's probably the worst thing you can do, because that's at a time when you need more visibility. And I would say this market is very cautious. And so it's really difficult to stop and start on a PR and marketing journey. So I would say find a way to keep it going. There's always creative ways to steal money from other budgets.
Do you think healthcare is becoming less cautious, not in a bad way, but I mean, it's renowned. Everybody likes to say it's a half generation back.
Yeah.
And I when I lecture, I talk about it's difficult to innovate in a do no harm culture, because everybody thinks that it's going to affect the patient sometime. Do you think it's making progress in terms of its forward thinking?
Yeah, so I do think it's making progress for sure, but it's definitely behind other industries. We do have some clients that work in multiple verticals, like financial services and education, and healthcare still is a little bit lagging.
Despite all the talk of consumerism,
it's
when we figure out what the consumerism is, we'll take that on at the same time. Okay, this was fantastic, Jodi. I mean, great to finally meet you. Great to have you on the program, and we'll look forward to having you and some of your clients on for thought leadership and future Chime.
Would love that, Frank. Thank you so much. So appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, thank you so much.
You bet. Bye-bye.